This week on the Men at the Movies podcast, we go back into the 80s and talk about Ghostbusters. We have a fascination with the unseen world that drives us. We get to choose how we use our hard times and our pain. And our gifts and talents are given to us so that we can serve others. Strap on your packs, but don't cross the streams unless you have to. Let's discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story. The story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me via the Zoom is my buddy Britt. Hey man, how you doing?
Hey man, I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
Good. Happy October to you. The Christmas decorations are out at Lowe's and pumpkin patches are everywhere. Right. I'm sure that pumpkin ale is already fading out to bring in the Christmas nutmeg spiced beer and all that other stuff.
Hey man, we're with the coffee company. We are already getting people asking for pumpkin spice flavored just about everything. And we're ready for some of it, but some of it we're not. And it's like, oh, we got to get that stuff put together.
That's right. I mean, most places it was out in August.
Yeah, we were a little behind on that.
Like Starbucks, I think Starbucks went with the PSL back in August.
PSL, baby.
As I've gotten older, like the super sugary stuff, the sugar gives me more jitters than the caffeine does. And I like coffee in my coffee.
Me too.
By the way, if you like coffee,
booyah.
Shameless plug. Check out phoenixroasters.com.
Phoenixroasters.coffee.
.coffee. Phoenixroasters.coffee. Yeah. Just Google Phoenix Roasters. It's great coffee, plus you support a great ministry and work, not just in Atlanta, but really worldwide.
All over the world.
Because you support some good, the farmers and all the transportation, all the stuff, all the things.
All the things. Change the world with great coffee. It's a win-win-win.
That's right. You get coffee, support the ministry, and then support the people who are supporting the ministry. Win-win-win, as Michael Scott would say.
That's right. I'm glad you got that reference. That's exactly what it was.
So we're not doing The Office. Trying to do the series would be forever. We're doing Ghostbusters. Because Britt said he wanted to do some scary movies. And people are like, well, Ghostbusters isn't really a scary movie. It could have been. There's some moments it could have been, especially with the music. We recorded Halloween, which will actually we recorded that one first, but it'll air after. That's a movie that definitely got its fear from the music. And this Ghostbusters is a movie that, eliminated fear with the music. I ain't afraid of no ghosts.
Bustin' makes me feel good.
So hopefully we won't get pulled for any copyright infringement by popping that in there. We're doing this because it's Halloween time. It's October. We were like, hey, we do some, every once in a while we hit a season. And Britt suggested a bunch of like slasher movies and scary movies. And I don't like those movies. So we did one. I agreed to one. Watched it. Volume way down. Lots of lights. Lots of distraction as I was watching it.
You have the dogs all cuddled up with you.
Yeah, keep me safe. But this one, I'm not afraid. I ain't afraid of no ghosts. So, Britt, when we talk about our Men at the Movies ideas and the movies we talk about, people are going to say, "What in the world do we find?" Oh, wait! Before we talk about Ghostbusters, I wanted to ask you this. Because Halloween, and on the Twitter sphere, Twitter world, Twitterverse, whatever word you use for the tweeters, there's always that, is it wrong for a Christian to cuss? The clickbait stuff. So Halloween can be a controversial take because everything's going to be controversial these days. It's like, if you can find a way to divide people, you will. Not you, Britt. I'm just...
I find ways. I'm not trying to, but I do find ways.
It just happens naturally. So I was going to ask what did you guys do for Halloween growing up or in your family currently?
Well, my mother was definitely she was not one of those people who was totally against Halloween. She would not let us dress up in as scary characters. She would, that was her thing. Now,
yeah.
I'm going to say this about my mother. Like, she made our costumes when I was little. Like, she sewed them. Like, I was young and I was in the 80s when all this stuff was happening, late 70s and through the 80s, early 80s. And that was back in those days. You had those plastic costumes that ripped after like 30 seconds. And you had the mask that you couldn't see out of and you couldn't breathe out of. My mother would make our costumes. Like, she sat down on a sewing machine. I was the Lone Ranger. One year I was a Lone Ranger. My little brother, God bless him, was tortured by being the sidekick. So I was the oldest, and then I had a little brother. So I was the Lone Ranger and he was Tonto one year. And then I was Batman and he was Robin. And these costumes were amazing. Like, if you saw them pictures, you would be like, oh my gosh, those are like really cool. The bad part is, as you know, I'm 6'4" and I grew like a weed. So like, I didn't get to enjoy these costumes for very long.
Right.
But we would go trick-or-treating and, we would do some stuff at our church. I do remember some stuff at our church. Mostly it was maybe watching one of those movies. Like, I don't know if you remember those movies back in the late 70s, early 80s, but they had these not very well produced Christian flicks where it was trying to scare you into being a Christian. And so sometimes they would have those like movie nights and it'd be like, don't go to hell. And here comes the Antichrist and, demons are going to get you. And I mean, all kind of stuff. And so they would kind of do that, but we didn't do a lot of that. So I was lucky or fortunate in the sense that the church I grew up in, they weren't super strict. And my mother wasn't super strict about, not doing anything about Halloween, but we definitely know some people and still know some people who feel that doing anything associated with Halloween is not cool. But that's just how we grew up. And my kids, they haven't gone trick-or-treating in a long time. Now, we were talking before we started recording about how some churches, when I was a kid,
yes. I want to hear this younger, so bad.
And some still do it. Like, I didn't realize some still do it because I hadn't seen one in probably 10 or 15 years.
If you thought what we've talked about up to here was kind of weird.
Well, if you've been around, especially in the South, then you know what I'm talking about. But these things are called judgment house. And some churches would have not a haunted house. So they would take the haunted house idea and they would, quote unquote, Christianize it in the sense of make it really scary and really dive into the, judgment day. And if you're not a Christian, you're going to go to hell and what hell's going to be like. And they literally will take little kids and like middle schoolers and high school, maybe not little kids, but like middle schoolers and high schoolers. And they would take them through this thing and just scare the pants off of these kids. Maybe that's not a good way to say it, nowadays, but scare these kids into like, oh my gosh, I need to say the prayer and accept Jesus. And they get a lot of salvations out of it. Again, we never did one of those. I never went to one. If I was going to go to a haunted house, like I was into slasher flicks, I didn't feel like I was, doing something against God by enjoying the regular Halloween stuff because it was all sort of cheesy to me. But they still exist and they were kind of a big deal for a while. And I will say this, as much as I would argue against doing that, I don't believe that fear on its own should be a motivator. At the same time, I will say that in some circles, the idea of hell and eternal punishment is not a popular thing. Nobody likes to think about it.
Right.
Like nobody likes to sit around and go, well, I'm just going to think about hell today and how awful it will be. Like that's an uncomfortable discussion. I don't care who you are. So I do think Jesus talked about hell more than anybody. And so the idea that there is an eternal punishment and is not something you want to deal with, I'm not against, but just some of the bring kids in and and light fires all around them and be like, you don't want this forever. It's a little manipulative to me, but yeah.
Yeah, that sounds horrible. And it's interesting because as we talk, they actually talk about Judgment Day in the movie. There's a clip. It's Ray and Winston in the car, and Winston opens up. He's like, "Hey, do you know God?"
Hey, Ray, do you believe in God?
Never met him.
Yeah, well, I do. And I love Jesus' style, you know.
This roof cap is made of a magnesium tungsten alloy.
What are you so involved with that?
These are the blueprints for the structural ironwork in Dana Barrett's apartment building, and they're very, very strange.
Hey, Ray, do you remember something in the Bible about the last days when the dead would rise from the grave?
I remember Revelation 7:12. And I looked as he opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became as black as sackcloth, and the moon became as blood.
And the seas boiled, and the skies fell.
Judgment Day.
Judgment Day.
Every ancient religion has its own myth about the end of the world.
Myth? Ray, has it ever occurred to you that maybe the reason we've been so busy lately is because the dead have been rising from the grave?
I don't know God, but I've memorized Revelation 7.
Oh my gosh. It's in every movie does it. It was in Shawshank Redemption. We didn't talk about it when we did Shawshank Redemption, but it was one of those, like, I love how in movies, these people aren't Christians, but they know scripture like the back of their hand. Like they can just quote any scripture.
And it's usually some random, well, when we did Fury, the war daddy had memorized something, or he knew something as he's saying goodbye to Bible. But I thought that was interesting. I had that clip already and didn't know about these Judgment House things. My parents had we went the other way. We did what they called it Reformation Day, because October 31st was the day Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses. October, yeah. So we would celebrate. We'd have a Reformation Day party at the church, as you said, sort of a Christianized version of Halloween, when you can dress up as your favorite Bible character.
Ooh.
Or something like that. So
interesting.
One guy had brought dirty clothes and singed it, and he was a wise man from afar.
That's awesome. Now, I love Reformation Day. I love talking about that on Halloween now. I mean, because it is such an important event, for us. But anyway, that's interesting that they would put those two together, Bible characters or whatever. Right.
So we never got into it. We never did the trick or treating thing. And so I have this, I did write this question down, but there's all these apocalypse movies, all these end of the world movies. Like if you watch a TV show like Supernatural, they're fighting to prevent the apocalypse, right? They're fighting to so the world doesn't end, or there's this great fear and trepidation about that idea. As Christians, as believers, as followers of Jesus, I don't think we should. I'm not even going to ask the question. I'm just going to answer my own question. I don't think we should have that fear of the end times, because that means Jesus is coming back, and that means things are going to be set right, and that means everything's going to be made new, and heaven's coming to earth, and the restoration of all things, as I think John Eldridge talks about in his book.
Well, Jesus does talk about wars and rumors of wars, and how it's going to be so bad that even the elect will barely make it. Like it's going to get bad, but then he calls them birth pangs. Like he's like that. It's only temporary. You got to remember that there's something, like you're saying, on the other side of it. And I remember, so I went to a Christian school when I was a kid, and they thought it was a good idea in the 5th grade to teach us about Revelation. And, if you don't take the number of the beast, then they're going to cut your head off and you're not going to get to eat, and like all this stuff. Right. I mean, they thought that was a good year to do that in the curriculum. So I come home.
Well, it's because you're about to go to middle school when you become the beast. So.
So I come home, and I was talking with my mom, and my mother is a saint and was a saint, because I'm a weird dude, and you know how weird I am. And I would come home with all sorts of questions, and I'm the oldest, and she was like 21 when she had me. So she was not really that old either, but God really gave her a lot of grace. And this is one of those moments, because I came home and I said, man, Mom, they tell me all this stuff. And, and I was worried, like, what do I do? What do you say? And she looked at me and she said, Britt, if you are supposed to go through that, God will give you the grace to do whatever he wants you to do. You don't have to worry about it. And something in me settled, like something within me in the 5th grade. I remember the feeling. I remember something in me just went at peace. Like, oh yeah. Like, oh, well, that makes sense. Yeah. Like, if you're going to go through that, then God will help you. But you don't have to think about doing it. If you think about doing it now, you don't have the grace for it. Right. It's kind of like, well, I forget the missionary's name. When she asked her father a similar question, he goes, when do I give you the ticket to get on the train? She goes, right before I get on. He goes, it's the same way with grace. Right. It's right. You can't be putting yourself and imagining things that might happen. Like you haven't been put in that context yet. If God wants you to go through something, and he will give you the grace to do it. Yeah. And I just remember, again, I teach people that as a pastor now. My mom told it to me when I was, but it's wisdom, it's wisdom.
Yeah. There's no expiration date on good mom advice.
Nope.
So the flip side of that whole idea of Judgment Day and people's fear, and you see it, like I said, in all these movies, all these TV shows, all these stories, right? This fascination with the unseen world. Mm-hmm. You see it, right? And then I know that the first clip was a little bit from later in the movie, but then earlier they show up, there's this sighting, right? There's something's going on at the library, and they show up and actually see a ghost for the first time, and it's Ray and Peter and Egon. So they see this, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's a full-bodied apparition!" Blah 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 blah. And Peter says, "Well, now what do we do?"
Right.
Could you come over here and talk to me for a second, please? Could you just come over here for a second, please? Right over here.
Come here, Francine. Come here. What do we do? I don't know. What do you think? Stop that! We've got to make contact. One of us should actually try to speak to it.
Good idea.
And this whole idea of, they're like, oh my gosh, it's a ghost, it's a whatever. And they're face to face with it. And that whole idea of, well, now what do I do? And he's like, I don't know. They're pulling out a book. They're pulling out some measurement, because that's what Egon does. He's like, oh, let me measure it. And Ray is trying to figure out the structural integrity of it. But Peter's the one who's like, all right, well, what do we do now? And of course, he's the one who has to go talk to the apparition. And then it screams and they run away. And I just thought that was interesting, this idea that this thing they're pursuing, this fascination with the unknown, the unseen, the supernatural, paranormal, whatever word you want to use for it. When you're face to face with what you're looking for, you run screaming away from it. So I just wanted to know what you thought of that scene. And this whole idea of the fascination with the supernatural, the unseen, the paranormal genre.
So 2 things. I think, first of all, that there is a reason why we are fascinated with it. It is not that big of a leap for any of us to believe that there are things that affect the world and our lives that we can't see. Now, whether we ascribe that to God, or the new thing is the universe does something, like, oh, the universe does something. It isn't that big of a jump for most of us, even in a very educated, quote unquote, educated, logical Western sort of culture that has stepped away from a lot of that, what we would call superstition. We're really still not that far from it. And there are other cultures, by the way, in the world that still to this day believe very strongly in spirits and different. And you've been to those countries. And
you too. And it's interesting because we look down on those cultures many times. So as being savage or barbarian or uneducated.
And there's a tension in this movie between the scientific and the supernatural. And I love the fact that they give the supernatural some substance. I know it's goo and it's gross, but I actually think it's interesting that they give the supernatural a substance, because the Bible talks about the spirit or the spiritual realm as having substance. when angels show up, they're not just ghosts. Like, they hold things and they do things. And, there's all sorts of substance. There's all sorts of things that they do. It's just a different substance than we're used to. It's an unseen thing. And sometimes it's revealed, but just because it's not seen doesn't mean it's not real. And I think that sort of fascination isn't very far from us, but I agree with you. I think it's a very interesting way to kick off the movie, that this is what these guys study, by the way. I mean, this isn't like they don't do anything. They're just physicists or something. That this is who they are. They are in the paranormal. He's doing the ESP sort of tests in the beginning. So they're in this sort of realm, and yet they've been doing it as hucksters for most of their life. They've been doing it as a game, and they have equipment and they have theories, but now all of that stuff becomes real. And I think for us as Christians, and I was talking about this the other day, I said, you know what? We need to be very clear that there is a supernatural world that influences what we do and what other people do, and including the power of the Spirit of God, and that there's a substance to that. And when people don't really believe that, it's a different world when they really encounter it. Even as Christians, like, I've been there when Christians first start to encounter this other world, right. And they're like, wow, I never knew. Like, they knew the Bible, they went to church, they did the religious kind of things, but when that sort of reality hits them, it is frightening, because
it's frightening because it doesn't fit in a box.
Yeah.
But this doesn't just go all the way to one end of the spectrum where you're talking about stuff like healings or like demonic possession or anything, like sort of those extreme examples, right. Even as simple as this idea of the conversational relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk a lot about that of the Spirit's guidance and all this, but it makes people who are very sciencey, very structured, it makes them uncomfortable because they're like, no, God doesn't speak in that way. God doesn't communicate that way anymore. And all this. Well, if that's what you believe, then you're not going to see it. And there was even in the Gospels where Jesus went somewhere and it says he couldn't do many miracles there because of the lack of their faith. So if you don't believe that the supernatural exists, then guess what? You're not going to see it because you've sort of closed yourself off to it. But what I like about Venkman in this movie, and we're going to talk more about his responses, and he even says at one point, I don't believe that either. But he accepts what he sees without trying to force it into fitting into the box. When he shows up and Dana's possessed by Zool and he's just reacts to the situation in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
He just accepts what he sees without forcing an interpretation on it, which I think most of us.
That's good.
And I say us because I do it too. Right? Yeah. We have our interpretation. Here is how the world works. And if it doesn't work the way I think it should, then I try to manipulate the situation more than my interpretation of it. Like, I thought about that, even that first scene. How would you react, Britt, if you were walking in the library and cards started flying out of the library card rack? Books start floating. You see a ghost.
Yeah, it would frighten you. And I've been in situations where, alone, I knew that there was another presence there that wasn't even God. Like, I've been in those things where it's like, oh my gosh, something else is here.
Yeah.
But if we're not ready for it, if we don't expect it, and if we're not ready for it, then
we run away screaming like
we're going to panic. And we don't know how to deal with it. And I think that for these guys, it's a very important part of the movie. It's good writing that they are confronted with it. And then now we're going to see how do they respond. So now they're confronted with it, with this reality that was unseen to them before. And now how are they going to react? How are they going to move forward as educated people,
And so there's, and you mentioned there's sort of these responses we have when we're confronted with the supernatural. And I watched this movie, and to me, I saw there's 3 different types of people. They're sheep, which is the general people. You just walk around with your blinders on. You don't see what's going on. And that's as much as they were sheep when they entered the library. Mm. And then there's people who just wanted to stay sheep, and there's people who decide to become a shepherd or a sheepdog. That's the better phrase, is the sheepdog, where they start engaging with these things that are outside the realm of normality, of naturalness, whatever phrase you want to use. And so when they get back after seeing it, and they're all excited because they're like, all this stuff we've devoted our lives to, and now we've actually seen one. Now, we can do stuff. And they get back to find that the university is closed down. They're kicking them out. But what they say and their response to it, I thought was really interesting.
Dr. Venkman, we believe that the purpose of science is to serve mankind. You, however, seem to regard science as some kind of dodge or hustle. Your theories are the worst kind of popular tripe, your methods are sloppy, and your conclusions are highly questionable. You are a poor scientist, Dr. Venkman.
I see.
And you have no place in this department or in this university.
This is a major disgrace. Forget MIT or Stanford now. They wouldn't touch us with a 10-meter cattle prod.
You're always so concerned about your reputation. Einstein did his best stuff when he was working as a patent clerk.
You know how much a patent clerk earns? No. Personally, I like the university. They gave us money and facilities. We didn't have to produce anything. You've never been out of college. You don't know what it's like out there. I've worked in the private sector. They expect results.
For whatever reasons, Ray, call it fate, call it luck, call it karma. I believe that everything happens for a reason. I believe that we were destined to get thrown out of this dump.
For what purpose?
To go into business for ourselves.
This ecto-containment system that Spengler and I have in mind is going to require a load of bread to capitalize. Where are we going to get the money?
I don't know. I don't know.
So the first response that they had, even before this clip, before they get fired, the first response that they had was, this is great for us. Our reputation is going to be amazing. We have been proven right. All of our inventions, all of our theories, they're proving true. And we're going to get a lot out of this. So we're going to have acclaim within the scientific community. And of course, then they get fired. And a couple of things I like about that clip is that the dean or whoever that was that fired them actually tells them and gives us the theme of the movie. He says, science should serve mankind. You treat it like a hustle. And I love that theme, because their first response is their own fame. And I think for many of us, when we start to deal with a gift, like we start to see the unseen and we start to realize, man, there's a gift here, and we have a way to engage that gift or that talent. It doesn't have to be ministry. It could be in anything. We have a powerful gift that God has given us. Our first response is, man, people are going to love me. You know, we all have those thoughts. We all have the thoughts of, man, people are going to think I'm awesome. And then the first thing that happens is they get fired and they're ashamed. That's the opposite. And they're actually told, by the way, that you're nothing. You guys are
a sham.
You're a sham.
Yeah.
Even though the setup is they actually have the information and the resources to deal with the judgment day that's coming. They don't know it's judgment day, and other people don't realize they have the resources and the know-how to actually deal with this threat, but they're being told, right, that they're nobody. And then their next response is money. Well, if we can't get a claim out of it, then we got to eat. And so let's try to get money out of it. And then it becomes a commercialization. We were talking earlier about how I see this a lot in ministry. And I see this a lot. It doesn't have to be ministry. It could just be a general, a gift, a dream, a purpose that God gives us. And God has given that to everybody, something bigger to be a part of his story. Because they were given this stuff to be a part of a much bigger story. They just didn't realize it. And their first thought was small, and I think a lot of times for us too, that's our first thought. It's small. What does C.S. Lewis say? It's not, the problem isn't our desires, but our desires are too small. Like it's the problem isn't that we want things, is that the things we want are just too small,
right,
compared to what God wants to give us. And so first it's fame, and that's a trap. And then the next thing is money, and that's a trap too. And we have to be very careful not to realize that we've been given these opportunities not for our own fame and not for money, but for something else.
Because it's very easy, especially in our American culture, to think, oh, God is blessing me because I'm getting a new job. I'm getting a new promotion. I'm getting a bigger house, bigger car. And it might be. I'm not saying it's not. That's what you got to walk with God through that to figure that out. But there's a very real sense that your new job, your new fame, your increased money is actually pulling you away from what God is really calling you to do.
Yeah.
Like I know somebody who walks with God very closely, and he said, God has plans for us and the enemy has plans for us. And so he asked God, he's like, what plan did the enemy have for me? And he said, you were going to be a very successful businessman. And it would have been a very easy road to follow, right? You just go down that road. And it's kind of the up and to the right. It's all growth. It's all positive. And if it dips and now you're out of a job, or somebody gets sick, or you have a crisis, then we assign that of, I'm not doing something right. God's upset with me. I'm in the judgment house. Right? When somebody gets sick and we don't see the prayers for healing being answered, we assume, if I had more faith, if I prayed right, if I just put a little more effort in, if, the reason you don't have a job, it's what the disciples say. Was it his parents or him or his parents who sinned that he was blind? He's like, neither. It's so God will have the glory. But we look at and we always talk about our externals. We look at those externals and we say, I must be, because of how the externals look, I must be going either good or bad. When when the reality is, and we're going to talk about this, is how we're engaging with the people God has placed in our lives. And another thing I wanted to pitch back to you, Britt, I believe there's a reason we lost our job. There's a purpose in this. There's a reason in this. And we're going to get to this idea a little bit later. But again, this happens a lot in movies.
Right.
Somebody dies. They've gone to a better place. Call it karma. Call it where they're searching for purpose. Yeah. And again, I'm going back to that. What is the fascination with the supernatural and the unseen? It's this desire coming out that we want there to be some purpose in our lives. We want there to be more than what we can see and even what we can manage.
Absolutely. There's a great meme, or it was out there. I don't know if it was a quote or whatever. I don't know. It might've been some preacher, but it said, there are two people that are really interested in your purpose and dealing with it. There are two people who believe that you have a great purpose, God and the devil. Those are the two people who absolutely believe that you have a reason to be here. And obviously God is trying to lead you and translate you through his spirit and his story into that journey. And obviously the devil is trying to keep you from it. And he's trying to bring you deeper into chaos and sorrow and all of those sort of things, and death and sin and all that sort of stuff. He's trying to get you for it to be about you. But it's not. The story, as we were talking about earlier, the story that God has for you is about his glory, God's glory, and it's about the good of others. And that's what the story is about. And so fame and profit alone, those ideas are not what the story is about. That does not come into why God has you on a story. Now you might get
That's
money.
That's not
out
why
of
we're a sheepdog, is to make money or to become famous. And look at that sheepdog over there. That's a pretty big deal.
Right. We were given these opportunities because God has something for us to do. And these are things that were prepared for us in advance. We don't have to manufacture a story. Like, he's already got the story. And that's what it says in Ephesians. He says, God has created you, or you were born again, saved you for good works that he prepared in advance for you to do. Like, you didn't even know, but he's got this story just waiting on you to start saying yes to him. And it's really that simple. It's also difficult. That's not easy, because we have to make decisions that sometimes look crazy and sometimes mean, the story also means we lose our jobs, or we, or we get looked down on, or all this sort of stuff. But here's the thing, we're going to go through hard times anyway. This is the reality of life. You're going to struggle with money. You're going to go through hard times. People are going to be pissed off at you for some unknown reason. Like, all this stuff is going to happen anyway. The choice is, are you going to take those things and make them eternal, and all things work out for good if you're on his purpose and on his journey? Or are you just going to make it about you and you're just suffering all of that crap for nothing? I know which one I want to do. I know which one I would choose. Is that if I'm going to suffer all those things, I want to suffer those things with Christ, with me, with Jesus, with someone who can comfort me, who can give me the reason why, who can say, it's not over. You didn't lose your job for nothing. I've still got you. You can trust me. Like, I'd rather have that than, well, God, a lot of people blame God for that sort of stuff.
Right.
And then they lose the joy and the intimacy of that journey. Not that it makes it easy, but it definitely easier. And I love that part too, that you pointed out, that I believe we lost this job we did this for a reason. This happened to us for a reason. And of course, you see the reason by the end of the movie.
Right. We've got a couple loose ends going right now. We will wrap them up into a bow here shortly. We've got the sheep, who are most of the people walking around. If we were talking about the Matrix, we'd say the people who are still plugged into the Matrix, they're the sheep, right? Then you've got the sheep dogs, the ones who have seen reality, the ones who understand how life works. And as we're going to talk about, their role is protecting the sheep. Because on the other side, you got the wolves. And in this movie, the big wolf is Walter Peck. And he's the EPA. He's the government agency official who's going to show up at the firehouse. And it's interesting because he talks to Peter Venkman, who's a doctor, but yet he never calls him Dr. Venkman. It's always Mr. in this, because wolves don't really respect sheepdogs very much.
Yes, I'm Dr. Venkman.
Exactly what are you a doctor of, Mr. Venkman?
Well, I have PhDs in parapsychology and psychology.
I see. And now you catch ghosts.
Yeah, you could say that.
And how many ghosts have you caught, Mr. Venkman?
I'm not at liberty to say.
And where do you put these ghosts once you catch them?
Into a storage facility.
And would this storage facility be located on these premises?
Yes.
And may I see this storage facility?
No.
And why not, Mr. Venkman?
Because you did not use the magic word.
What is the magic word, Mr. Venkman?
Please.
May I please see the storage facility, Mr. Venkman?
Why do you want to see the storage facility?
Well, because I'm curious. I want to know more about what you do here. Frankly, there have been a lot of wild stories in the media, and we want to assess any possible environmental impact from your operation. For instance, the presence of noxious, possibly hazardous waste chemicals in your basement. Now, you either show me what is down there, or I come back with a court order.
You go get a court order, and I'll sue your ass for wrongful prosecution.
You can have it your way, Mr. Venkman.
And the thing I want to key on is that, why do you want to see the containment unit? Because I'm curious. Bullshit. He's not curious.
No.
He does not care. Because curious is the questions of to learn, right?
Oh, sure.
We should be curious, especially
Absolutely.
when dealing with stuff that we're not familiar with. Curiosity does not kill the cat.
No, we were created to be curious.
Right.
So that's why God gives us things to dig. He wants us to dig for the treasure in the field, right? He actually wants us to be curious. He's made us that way. It's our joy to be curious.
But he's not, Walter Peck is not curious.
No.
What that is you see him looking for chinks in the armor. And even, you didn't say the magic word. And being the government bureaucrat that he is, what is the magic word? Because in his mind, the Ghostbusters were so far out there that the magic word would be like abracadabra or Voldemort or something along those lines, like a weird magic word, like supernatural. Woo! He's like, please. It's like, be nice, be kind. I don't mind. If you were legitimately curious, I would be happy to show you. You're not curious. You're using this as a way to attack what we're doing and thwart us from, as you sort of mentioned earlier, pursuing the path that God has placed us on to do the good works He has created ahead of time.
Yeah. So the two things about this I love I love that they were taking the supernatural stuff and taking them captive. Right? The Bible literally says, "Take captive the thoughts that exalt themselves against the knowledge of God." You take these things
thoughts
captive.
could be considered supernatural
And
because you can't see them or measure them.
Absolutely. Purpose is supernatural. Destiny is supernatural. All of these things are unseen to us, which is like you said, we want to be a part of a bigger story. That's why we do this podcast. That's why we love these movies. But all that to say is that he is from a government agency. So he's from the law. So that's what he's representing within that sort of idea, which he's representing a legal claim. He's not representing, wow, isn't this great that you're actually helping people? But that he's questioning, but there's two ways to question. You can question out of curiosity to learn and to find out the story. And you can still make a judgment later. Like somebody can tell you the story and you're like, well, that sounds pretty awful. Right. Or you can, but he's questioning in order to tear down. And,
right.
And that's what law does. That's what the law does. The letter of the law kills. Of course, it comes to light later when he makes them shut it down, and they keep trying to tell him, like, you don't want to do this,
And it's interesting because when they entered into something that was beyond their understanding at that point, they ran. And he's entering into, I don't know what's going on, but I want it shut down.
Right.
And causes a catastrophe. But
I love the fact that they take these things captive, and that the law, I mean, just think about the concepts, the primal sort of, that's not really primal, but the metaphorical concepts that are happening here is that the law sets them free again. That the law didn't seek to help them be captive, the danger be captive. The law actually set it all free again. And that's what Paul says in Romans. He's like, the law just told me, it actually helped me to do wrong things. I had a principal tell me one time, because we were talking about bullying and what to share about bullying. And he goes, well, we got to be careful, because the more we talk about bullying, we're actually giving kids ideas. You're actually telling kids how to bully.
You're empowering it. Yeah.
We're actually telling them, we're giving them ideas they didn't even know about. Oh, I didn't know you could bully people that way.
I hadn't even thought about doing that.
And but again, that's what the law does. The law says, don't do this. And
it's powerless to save.
And it's powerless to save. But when it says don't do this, it's trusting in our own strength. But again, they have nuclear reactors on their backs, right? and I wanted to go through this as part of their of their resources. When we head into spiritual warfare, we're dealing with something really powerful. We're dealing with something really powerful. And it took more than one of them to do it together. Like for them to hold these things captive right? Like one puts to flight 1,000, two puts to flight 10,000. Like the Bible says it's exponential. The more people that we get involved to pray with and to fight these spiritual battles with, because it's about relationship. God's not about a singular person. He's about relationship. It's about others. It's about unity. It's about a community. And so all of that stuff, I think, is really interesting. Again, how much did they put it in there to show that on purpose? Probably very little. Probably very little. But on the other hand, I think that it makes it very kind of cool to use as an analogy to say, man, when we're going against these unseen forces that are real and have substance and can actually destroy things, right? Steal, kill, and destroy. That, number one, I'm going into there. If I'm going in with the Holy Spirit, I'm going in with like the most powerful thing in the room. And I got to learn how to use this, right? I got to learn how to use the armor of God. I got to learn how to use the sword and the shield and the helmet and I got to learn how to use these unseen things.
Because their first battle wasn't with Gozer, it was with Slimer.
Right, exactly.
The pretty generic, low level, not a big deal ghost. And it's only as they went through that their levels, basic. It's like a video game. They leveled up.
Yeah. Well, sure.
Until they had to face the boss level of Gozer.
Yeah. So that's a normal scene in a movie, right? You deal with one and you have to overcome that one and you learn how to do it together. But then it became normal to do all the different ghosts. Then after they had kind of settled their skills at that level, like you're saying, then they were called to deal with something bigger. And God does the same thing with us. Look, I'm telling you, God never wants me to be comfortable. If I ever think, man, I got this figured out, God's like, well, I got to mess something up for him then, because well, you become too dependent on yourself and not dependent on him. Exactly. So he puts me in he puts me on another level to deal with new devils, right? You ever hear that story? That phrase, right? Like new levels, new devils. Like he's putting you on a different plane sometimes to say, okay, you've overcome this. Now I'm going to give you a new battle to fight. And I know sometimes that's not the most encouraging thing to hear, because I know for me, maybe not you, and maybe not most people, but for me, I'm like, you're saying I overcame this guy and this thing, and now you got something else for me to tackle? Like, can I just, have a moment to just not, and he does give us rest. But again, it's always about resting in him and in his power. It goes back to what we were talking about when you were in the 5th grade and you were scared of the judgment, right? Of Judgment Day. Well, if we go through that, God's grace is still available. God's grace will still get you through that. So that's how you find rest in those moments, is putting on the proton pack on your back and saying, oh yeah, I do have God's grace is within me. And that even in the midst of the apocalypse, you can find that security. And so we step into the mayor's office because the mayor of New York City is freaking out. He's like, we just had this bomb go off. There's ghosts everywhere. And it's interesting because you see the sort of the worldly wisdom guys who are here trying to explain it as, like when you hear about the natural gas clouds from the UFOs and stuff like that. So they're there. The church guy comes in. Peck is there. And you've got these guys who come in and they sound crazy because they're talking about the apocalypse. And it's the question that he asks at the very end is the one that I really want to dig into after we listen to this clip. Cool.
I am Walter Peck, sir, and I'm prepared to make a full report. These men are consummate snowball artists. They use sense and nerve gases to induce hallucinations. People think they're seeing ghosts. And they call these bozos who conveniently show up to deal with the problem with a fake electronic light show.
Everything was fine with our system until the power grid was shut off by Dickless here.
They caused an explosion.
Is this true? Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
Break it up. All right.
Well, that's what I heard.
This City Hall. Now, what am I going to do here, John? What is this?
All I know is that was no light show we saw this morning.
I've seen every form of combustion known to man.
but this beats the hell out of me.
The walls in the 53rd precinct were bleeding. How do you explain that?
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Oh, Your Eminence.
How are you, Lenny?
You're looking good, Mike. We're in a real fix here. What do you think I should do?
Lenny, officially, the church will not take any position on the religious implications of these phenomena. Personally, Lenny, I think it's a sign from God. But don't quote me on that.
No, I think that's the smart move, Mike.
Well, I'm not going to call a press conference and tell everyone to start praying.
I'm Winston Zeddemore, Your Honor. Look, I've only been with the company for a couple of weeks, but I gotta tell you, these things are real. Since I joined these men, I have seen shit that'll turn you white.
Well, you could believe Mr. Pecker.
My name is Peck.
Or you could accept the fact that this city is headed for a disaster of biblical proportion.
What do you mean, biblical?
What he means is Old Testament, Mr.
Yes.
Mayor. Real wrath of God type stuff.
Exactly.
Fire and brimstone coming down from the skies. Rivers and seas boiling.
40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes.
The dead rising from the grave.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Enough, I get the point.
What if you're wrong?
If I'm wrong, nothing happens. We go to jail, peacefully, quietly. We'll enjoy it. But if I'm right, and we can stop this thing, Lenny, you will have saved the lives of millions of registered voters.
I love the question. What if you're wrong? Because as a Christian, and really as the stuff we talk about here on the podcast, what if we're wrong? If we're wrong, we're spent living lives where we find purpose and calling and mission. And if science is right and we just die and go to dust into this blank nothingness, who cares? Right? I'm a blank nothingness. It's gone. But if I'm right and we go and we live this life of calling and purpose, because we're still living in the ghost world, right? Shit's still going to happen. We're still going to have to deal with it. Like we're still having to face the wolves. We still have to face the ghosts. We still have to face the unseen world. But if we're right and we do that and it brings us closer to God and we die and everything that we hope for happens, there's no downside to pursuing a deeper walk with Jesus.
Right.
And that's sort of what he said is, if we're wrong, we'll go to jail. We'll enjoy it. It'll be fine. But if we're right, and he appealed to what you were saying earlier, that whole idea of acclaim and reputation, you will have saved the lives of millions of voters.
They end up realizing the purpose that they have for being in this story, which is to actually save people, which is to save the city. They were given this opportunity. They were shown the unseen. They were given these gadgets and the technology, and they developed this technology and all the gifts that they had. They were given all of this for one purpose, and that is to stop this apocalyptic thing from hurting people. All the people in the city, the cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria.
Mass hysteria.
But that is why it was given to them. And at that point, it doesn't matter what they get out of it. They're literally willing to go to jail. We are willing to suffer just to try to help people.
And it doesn't matter if they believe or not. It doesn't matter if you believe in ghosts in this scenario or not. If you're like, no, that's crazy. Well, we're still going to do it.
We're still going to do it. And you see that self-sacrificial element through the rest of the movie. They're willing to endure suffering. They're not going to get paid. They're not going to get more money or more acclaim necessarily. They don't know. Well, all they know is if we don't stop this, then the city is toast. And it's visual. They can see it's happening. There's explosions and there's all this stuff, right? They understand this is what's happening. And so they are willing to be the ones like it wouldn't have been a very good movie, but it would have been interesting to say, okay, bring us some cops and we'll give you guys the nuclear weapons and you guys go. No, they were like, no, we are the ones to do this. This is why we are here. There's no one else that can do this. We are the only ones. And And that's who we are as the church, by the way. I mean, that's who we are as a church. There is no plan B. That's Rich Mullins. Rich Mullins said, you can not like the church as much as you want, but in God's mind, there's no plan B. Like he wants to use the church. He's not out to use the government over here. I mean, he uses stuff, but like his method of revealing himself to a lost and dying world is the church. The solution isn't found in anywhere else. Any other quote unquote organization or whatever you want to call it, that's where it is. And so I love that they kind of take that up at the end. And of course it's silly and it's funny. And, there's Marshmallow Dude and, this all sort of stuff. Right. And it's silly and it's funny, but that sort of arc and element to it, I think has a lot of power.
Yeah. And that whole idea of they wouldn't, without their proton packs and their willingness, Gozer wins, right?
Yep.
And yes, it may be sort of boiling it down a bit, but we're the same way. We have been prepared the same way for our boss levels that we face in our lives. We are scared. We feel overmatched. And like they do, we're going to sometimes have to try things that we thought we'd never try.
I have a radical idea. The door swings both ways. We could reverse the particle flow through the gate.
How?
We'll cross the streams.
Excuse me, Egon. You said crossing the streams was bad.
Cross the streams.
You're going to endanger us. You're going to endanger our client, the nice lady who paid us in advance before she became a dog.
Not necessarily. There's definitely a very slim chance we'll survive.
I love this plan. I'm excited to be a part of it. Let's do it.
The job is definitely not worth $11,500 a year.
This job is not worth $11,500 a year. This was back in the mid 80s.
Wow.
That's a different pay scale back then.
Yeah, right.
But that idea that you told us never to cross the streams, and now you're saying the only way we're going to beat Gozer is to cross the streams. And he's like, there is definitely a very slim chance that we might survive.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's how it feels when you're actually stepping into that. And when we talked before, you mentioned Moses, how what God said was, I have heard the cries of my people.
Mm.
And Moses is like, yeah, I did too. And I left because I freaked out. I got whatever Moses react. There is definitely a very slim chance that I might survive going back to Egypt here, guy.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're in a burning bush, which is kind of weird. I've never seen this before. Again, he's coming face to face with the supernatural.
Yep.
And how's he going to respond? But the purpose, as I hope that you guys who are listening and understand, the purpose is not to be awesome, to be famous, to be rich, to make things, to have more followers or whatever. The purpose is to hear the cries of God's people and to interact in ways that only we can. Like, I'm not called to work for a church and a coffee company in Atlanta. That's Britt's gig. I'm called to be the father and a husband and amateur home improvement specialist here in Charlotte. But we do what we can do, and then God says, hey, sometimes you got to cross the streams. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that looks like, but there's stuff that you're like, oh, you're going to have to enter in and do stuff. And I think for me, it's my son is in college, and I know he's going out to the clubs, and I know he's going to parties, and I know he's drinking. And what I want to say, I want to bring the hammer of judgment. I want to bring the law down. Don't do that. You're screwing up your future. You're doing all this. And what I'm doing is, hey, I don't think that's the smartest move, but I still want to know what he's doing without bringing that hammer of judgment down, which is what feels like the right thing to do, but is really, I know, would just drive a wedge between us.
Mm.
And that might not be the thing that you got to do for your kids or your relationships or whatever, but that's where God is leading me. And it does feel like crossing the streams, because I'm like, he's going to screw up his life, and then what's going to happen? He's going to move back in here in 2 years and be a bum for the rest of his life. That's the fear talking, right?
Right. Yeah. That's the imagining the worst. Well, maybe.
That's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in my head. So, Britt, any closing wrap up comments you want to make?
No, I just think that there's a lot to this movie that make it work in a sense that of lessons we can learn, which is kind of strange to think about Ghostbusters, right? I mean, it's a comedy.
Right.
Like, this is a silly comedy, but I think we've shown again that these movies last because they have these universal elements to them that stick with us for one reason or another. The elements are already there of a good story, of a good arc, and it was interesting and entertaining, and it escalated, and I just think there's a lot to it that we can look at, and just to remember that our gifts and our talents are meant for the good of others. Paul said, I'd rather be dead so then I could be with Jesus. I'm not at that point. Me personally, Britt, I'm not at that point yet. But that's what he was saying in the scripture. And he said, but if I'm here, if I'm still here, then I'm here for you. I'm here for others. I'm here to encourage people. I'm here for others. And that is sometimes a hard thing to do because it's very normal to look for what we can get out of a relationship or what we can get out of a situation or what we think we're owed or all of that sort of stuff. But it really is a kingdom idea to realize I already own everything in Christ. Jesus plus nothing is still everything. And so that means I can be generous and I can serve and I can do all those things which may not always come naturally to me, but I can be self-sacrificial like they were at the end and to say, there's a small chance we're going to survive, but we have to do this because this is for the good. This is for a good reason. And it's for the good of others. And even though they did get to party at the end and everyone cheered anyway, all that to say is that's a whole nother element. They did get a glorious entrance, right? They got, they did get a claim that they weren't seeking, right? So just for me to remember that, it's a good reminder for me coming up on some opportunities to realize, like, man, my goal should be to serve and to encourage others and to see that others have good things, and that makes me successful in the kingdom.
Yep. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Men at the Movies podcast, talking about Ghostbusters with Paul McDonald and Britt Mooney. Check out our website, menatthemovies.com/podcast to find out. I put on there, especially since we've thrown in some quotes and some websites, and so links and accurate quotes will be up there. And make sure that you check us out next week, October 29th. We're airing Halloween, the first horror movie that we would have done, slasher flick.
It might be the only one. It might be the only one.
Yeah, I don't know. You might like it. We'll do it. It's fine. And we'll kind of, we're going to dig a little more deeper and more focused into this idea of the supernatural world that the world that surrounds us. So hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters!
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?